Welcome back to another episode of the Pain, Performance, and Pohada podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nick Smith. I'm a licensed physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach for jiu-jitsu and under combat athletes. We are circling back today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about TRT, hormone replacement therapy, and some of the things that have just happened in my journey as I'm coming up on around a year, and I had a recent blood work done and just made some changes. Now, over the course of the last year, I've had periodic blood work that's been done anywhere between every 4 to 12 weeks, depending on the cycle that I'm on. And throughout this time, I've had instances where my dose has gone up, it's gone down, my symptoms have changed a little bit due to testosterone, estrogen, a lot of different imbalances going on, and just trying to figure these things out. And I think it's important to bring this up only because it's not something that just automatically gets resolved right away. And I think there's a lot of stigma around taking TRT for a couple of reasons. One, which I talked about in the previous episode, just about, hey, TRT is steroids. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more. And two, a lot of people only see the performance or the aesthetic benefits from it. If you were to look at me now as in comparison to over a year ago before I started, I look drastically different. One, my hair is gone. That wasn't from the TRT. I buzzed it off. And two, I'm just a lot bigger. When I was competing in jiu-jitsu before TRT, I was competing at medium heavy, and I was even getting down as low as 188.6 to be able to compete in no-gi. As of this morning, I stepped on the scale with, a little bit, not full breakfast, but, hydrated and a little bit of food. I'm 210, so a lot thicker. For a long while, I was walking around at 195 pretty comfortably, between 190, 195, every single day for years. And now I've skyrocketed into 210. And, for a while I was pretty lean. I'm not as diligent about my nutrition because I haven't competed in a while, but I'm definitely thicker. Everybody that I roll with now is like, dude, you're just heavy. You're just a big boy now. So now that I'm in the technically super fat classification, definitely gotten bigger. But my point in all this is that there's been a lot of changes that have occurred physically. And people only see the external. I was still dealing with a pretty significant drop off in terms of my energy towards the end of the week, noticing that, I would take my singular injection of testosterone cypionate and HCG to keep my normal, naturally producing testosterone rolling. But come Wednesday afternoon, I would start to get pretty fatigued. I thought it was just due to just me working really hard, and that is true. But I started looking into it more. I knew that traditionally when these things are done, a split dose is a little bit more appropriate. So a couple times a week to spread this out keeps your lows not as low and your highs not as high. Just a very even keel. So that's something I've actually switched to as of this week. During that time when I would have that peak kind of drop off too, noticed not just energy levels down, a little bit more emotional, a little bit more off. And I think it's important to reiterate how important it is to get blood work done during this process. They should be checking you at least every 3 weeks, every 3 months at the very least, something quarterly. So you kind of know until you actually have your numbers kind of evened out. And then I know it's okay to get it stretched out every 6 months. But as you're making these micro adjustments, it's so important to get that routine blood work. One, although you might be getting jacked, although you might be feeling a ton of energy, there are byproducts of these changes, right? Blood pressure changes, PSH, your susceptibility of getting prostate cancer can go up. There's also changes in hemoglobin, blood thickness, which can lead to stroke or other heart problems if it's abused. But if you're having routine blood work, you should have a good knowledge of what these things are going on. And that's why if you haven't started this process or you're thinking about starting this process, which I just want you to get blood work. If you're listening to this right now, and I'm going to chop this up and I know it's going to be a reel. If you're listening to this right now and you have not gotten routine blood work in the last year, I want you to stop and pause this podcast right now and go schedule to get some wellness labs. Try to get testosterone or some kind of hormones in that. If you are unable to do that, I will send you to resources of places that you can. I mentioned in the last episode, there's places local. If you're local to me, I can send you some places. There are places that will do all of these labs at a very affordable price. A lot of them will take HSA, FSA if it's not within your insurance. But for a couple $100, it's something that could literally save your life. Go get blood work now. If you haven't done it last year, do it. Do it now. That's the main point that I want to get home today. The second piece of this that I really want to touch on is things that have come up in conversation since doing TRT. I've been very transparent about this process. I have absolutely nothing to hide. I've been a big advocate, proponent for people getting blood work and being in the know. Having your hormones regulated is important for normal body functions, not just performance. Yes, of course, like I'm more muscular now, I can train harder. All of those things are a byproduct of that. But you have to understand what I was feeling before in terms of depression, in terms of just like low energy, not doing well mentally, was all a byproduct of my hormones being way out of whack. And since then, mental health has changed a lot. Confidence is skyrocketed. And yes, I look better. It's a great thing. But I really want to emphasize some conversations that I've had with people. And I brought this up on the previous episode about how there is a stigma about people being like, they kind of like thumb their nose at it. Like, oh, you're on TRT now. And it actually got brought up with one of my teammates, older black belt. And, you know, I happened to walk out of the gym. I didn't have a shirt on. They commented, you know, on my, hey man, you're looking pretty good. And then they just were like, oh yeah, TRT. And I'm just like, buddy, yes, it helps. Okay. But you have to understand, my hormone levels are not extra physiological. They're not, I'm not somebody like, you know, Cowboy Cerrone who like openly has said, yeah, I walk around like 1200 to 1500 on my test levels. That's not where I'm hanging out at. I'm actually still low. They just bumped up my dose because I was still in the 600s. So at the Mark Men's Health where I go, they really try to keep you as close to 800 being the peak, assuming you have no other side effects. So 800 is still pretty conservative, especially if you're looking at a lot of the research. There's some research that will say, you know, around 1,000 to 1,200 is perfectly safe as long as you're not having any other symptoms. At 800, that's where people start to have some issues. But having these conversations, this has come up more than once. I feel like men have been conditioned to think that TRT is like almost like Ozempic in a way where it's like, you know, people are actually getting help to like create a better lifestyle, right? And no one can be happy. You know, there's this like body positivity movement. And then at the same time, you got this crowd of people who are still almost like shit talking it. Like, it's like, oh, well, you took the easy way out. It's like, well, hold on. Prior to going on TRT, I had very low body fat percentage. I was still muscular. I was still fit. I was still able to train. And I had great habits in terms of, you know, occasionally having fun food and desserts, you know, everything in moderation, including moderation. And I hardly drank. And I was trying to prioritize my sleep and do all of these things that are like the foundations of it. And I looked a certain way. And it was great. Like if I looked like that for the rest of my life, I'd be perfectly happy. And then finding out that my testosterone was stupid low, you know, low 200s, which is insane. Now that I'm getting closer to optimal physiological levels for somebody who trains as hard as I do, yeah, all the benefits and all the years of strength training that I've done and I've put into this are finally like I've been playing on expert mode for no reason. But I want this whole stigma about TRT being like this, like, oh, I'm above that. Like, okay, well, if you're at normal physiological levels, then obviously you don't need it. Yes, if you want to poke fun or if you want to say something to somebody who's like in their early 20s who doesn't actually have hormone problems and they're just taking it just because they want to be juiced to the tits, sure, you can give them as much crap as you want to, but you might be, you're not aware of this, but you might be keeping somebody from getting the help that they need, which might be decreasing their lifespan. And I really want you to consider that for a second. The next time you are talking to an older jiu-jitsu guy who's trying to get his health in order and you were giving him shit about thinking about TRT, it's the reason men don't talk to each other about any of this stuff, because they're always going to get crap from somebody else. But you have to understand, these things can lead to people dying earlier if they're off. This isn't just a performance enhancement thing. Yes, it is a byproduct of that. But if your hormones are out of whack, it can lead to other things which kill you sooner. So the next time you have a conversation with somebody about TRT and you haven't fully dove into it, don't thumb your nose at that person, because if that strays them away from getting help that they need, that actually might allow them to spend more time with their family, live a healthier lifestyle, and you're burdening that because you have an ego, because you have outdated messages from the 80s, check yourself. Legitimately check yourself. If you've done that in the past, I would really encourage you to change that and be a little bit more open-minded and understand that not everybody that takes TRT is taking it for steroid benefits. There are people who legitimately need help. Give those people a chance. If you want to give shit to those people who are in their 20s to take it, by all means, I'm right there with you. But also, those people who are also thumbing their nose at people are oftentimes the ones who complain the most about their injuries, not being strong enough. They have horrible habits, and you're not the one getting your blood work. So for you, if you've been thumbing your nose at people who have been getting TRT, maybe you should go get blood work. Recall back to my statement a few minutes ago. If you haven't gotten blood work in the last year, time to call your doc. Go get it done. That's it. I've said enough. I've talked a lot about my TRT journey in the past and kind of what my stigma was around this in a previous episode. And I'll link that previous episode in the show notes if you want to listen to that. A little bit more context about what I went through more specifically. But for today, this is just kind of like a recap, 1 year anniversary, so to say, of how things have been going. And get your blood work. That's all I got to say. It's important. It can quite literally change your life. It changed mine. And I'm not saying you need to do that because you need to go on TRT, but I think getting blood work and understanding what your cholesterol is like, what's your blood like, what's your heart like, what's your metabolic stuff like, understanding those things, you can observe trends. You should be getting it at least every year. If not, try to get it done every 6 months. A lot of insurance will do those wellness labs either cheap or for free. I know Kaiser did a lot of them for free. They just wouldn't do my testosterone. If you go to these places that offer hormone replacement therapy, they will check those panels as well, and their places online. So I'll put some links to those that will be helpful. If you're local to the Inland Empire, Chino, Pomona, Chino Hills area, I could not recommend the Mark Men's Health anymore. They've been incredible. I know they're opening up a new spot also in Pasadena. So if you live in the Pasadena area or even East LA, wouldn't be too far away from you. They've been incredible. They're super professional and they've been taking care of me. So shameless plug, not sponsored, just a fan. But yeah, till next time, remember, pain is not something you should fear, just something you should respect. This is the way. See you.